I'm Tom Hannifan alongside the Drama King Matthew Rehwoldt. The fans are making their way out of the Rebel Entertainment Complex here in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Impact Wrestling on Access TV just wrapped up, and Rehwoldt, we saw a hellish scene between the Impact World Champion Steve Macklin and PCO as we went off the air.
I mean, what a way to end the show, but what a way to start the reign of Steve Macklin as our Impact World Champion. If this is a sign of things to come for him in his reign, I can't wait to see what's next.
Absolutely. Mayhem awaits. We are going to dive into what exactly happened between Macklin, PCO, and DAmour a little bit later on here on this post-show following Impact Wrestling on Access TV. But first off, I want to talk about the first match of the night that we saw here in Toronto. It was a huge six-man tag team matchup. Time Machine up against Speedball Mike Bailey, Jonathan Gresham, and the reigning X Division champion Trey Miguel. I want to start with the team of Miguel, Gresham, and Bailey. These three were involved in a triple threat elimination match for the X Division championship at Rebellion less than a week ago. And now they got a team together. This just looked like it was a recipe for disaster from the outset.
Oh, I mean, what a unique scenario to have three former opponents who were in a championship matchup now all of a sudden have to team together. Now, Bailey and Gresham are kind of used to that. We've seen that great rivalry back and forth between the two of them over the last several weeks, but they've also attempted to team together a few times too, with some success as well. So for them, not totally unfamiliar territory. However, Trey Miguel was maybe a little more on his own mission as opposed to a team mission in that situation.
Yeah, Trey Miguel thinks he's better than everyone, and I don't necessarily agree with the way he's behaved.
Right, but here's the thing. Let's look at this really quick. Not only did he win that match at Rebellion, the triple threat elimination match, he beat both his opponents that night, Gresham and Bailey. But in this entire beginning match to Impact, he's the only person to come out of Rebellion victorious.
I understand what you're saying. However, he was not victorious this evening as we kicked off Access TV with this matchup. It was Chris Saban who ultimately pinned the reigning X Division champion, Trey Miguel, and Miguel can really only blame himself. Frankly, he was trying to order around Speedball and Gresham, and I'll put it this way, Miguel screwed Miguel, and in the end, Chris Saban pinned a reigning champion. You know what that means.
I mean, yeah, all right, Trey Miguel, maybe got in his own way a little bit, guaranteed, but what you just said, that's the bigger point. Chris Saban, somebody who's got an incredible, indelible history, championship history in this company, just pinned another one of our champions. That could be a hell of a match we see down the line. I hope so. Knocking on wood, knocking on whatever this is, skull, right?
Emptiness, yes. We'll have to see where that goes.
Nice.
But at the same time, the rest of the team for Time Machine, very interesting night at Rebellion. We'll get to Kushida in a moment. Let's talk about the Motor City Machine Guns. It was Ultimate X for the Impact World Tag Team titles to begin Rebellion, the first Ultimate X match for the Impact World Tag Team titles in 8 years. The Motor City Machine Guns came up short that night against Ace and Bay. That was one of the more interesting decisions I've ever seen in Ultimate X, the way Ace and Bay handed the championships down from the X.
Oh, it was a great strategy, and especially coming into this matchup, let's not forget Motor City Machine Guns were undefeated in tag team Ultimate X matches. They came in with an incredible history in Ultimate X, both individually and as a team. All the odds were in their favor, but ABC, like they've been doing all over lately, got it done. That incredible big brain strategy, forehead strategy there by using the idea that, remember, you had to get the belts and bring them down to the floor. Bay stayed up top, Ace stayed down at the bottom. Bada bing, bada boom, Bob's your uncle, champions. You go home for dinner, you have a drink, you go out in Toronto. It was good time for Ace and Bay.
So Saban obviously helping himself and the Motor City Machine Guns rebound with the pinfall victory against Trey Miguel earlier on tonight. But as regards to the rest of Time Machine, let's turn our attention to Kushida. This was a spectacular effort that Kushida put forward at Rebellion, battling Steve Macklin for the vacant Impact World Championship. This really could have gone either way. The way Kushida fought that night, it seemed like at any moment, at any given angle, he could get the hoverboard lock. Why do you think it didn't go his way?
I mean, I think Macklin just did enough of his homework. I know, like he said, the target change relatively last minute. Macklin had to change his entire year-long strategy to now go entirely after Kushida. And I think he did his homework, even though Kushida was laser focused on that left arm of Steve Macklin. At several points, looked like he had nearly obliterated that entire left side of Macklin, and it was only going to be a matter of seconds. But somehow, some way, Macklin turning the pace of the match to his favor got it done.
Yeah, Kushida, a spectacular effort, nothing to be ashamed of. And that night, that match in particular, was highlighted by a surprise guest. You and I were not aware that we were going to have a guest on commentary for the Impact World Championship match. Making his triumphant return to the Impact Zone was the former Impact World Champion, the two-time NWA World's Heavyweight Champion, Nick Aldis. What was your immediate reaction when it was announced that here comes Nick Aldis?
Well, first, I hear Penzer get in the ring and I say, why? And I think, here's our guest commentator for the matchup. And I'm like, wait, we weren't told about this. And then out comes the former world champion, two-time NWA world champion, like this guy with this pedigree. Nick Aldis carries this gravitas with him. It was an absolute shock and honor to have him out here.
Yeah, we're going to get into a little bit of what Nick Aldis shared with us in an exclusive interview earlier on tonight on Access TV. That's coming up in a matter of moments. And also the altercation between the Impact World Champion Steve Macklin and PCO. Don't go anywhere. That's next.
Fight back, then attack. Never let your guard down. May 26th on Fight, the assault continues mercilessly and with extreme malice. This world is not for the weak. This world is meant for those who were born to conquer. Impact Wrestling presents Under Siege, live May 26th on Impact Plus and Fight.
Welcome back to Ringside. As we mentioned before the break, it was earlier on this evening on Access TV that Nick Aldis granted an exclusive interview to go a little bit more in depth as to why he's back here in Impact Wrestling.
I've got my sights firmly set on the World Championship, which means they're set on you, Steve Macklin. Now, Steve, let's talk about the gravity of this situation for a second. Do you understand what you hold in your hands? The legacy of this company, the recognized symbol of excellence in this sport, the Impact Wrestling World Championship. I know what it feels like to carry that weight, because you're carrying the weight of every single person in here, every crew member, every roster member, every fan around the world. And when your legs, as big as they may be, start to wobble just a little bit under that weight, when you start to crumble just a little bit under that weight, you better watch out, because I'm going to be there ready to pounce. Because when I get my shot at the World Championship, I'm ready to usher in the oldest era of Impact Wrestling.
Well, Nick, our new world champion, Steve Macklin, has his changing of the guards ceremony tonight. Will you be attending?
I will not be attending, because, as Steve requested, he doesn't want anybody there. And you know what? That's the champion's prerogative, and I respect that because I've had the champion's prerogative before. But Steve, I'll be watching. I'll always be watching.
I mean, you hear it from the man himself. He is back here in Impact. He knows the competition here, and he's got his eyes laser focused on the Impact World Championship, and that's Steve Macklin right now.
Yeah, and Steve Macklin already has an enormous bullseye on his back, and he's very well aware of that. Earlier on this evening on Impact Wrestling on Access TV, the Impact World Champion, Steve Macklin, had his changing of the guard ceremony, obviously crowned the new Impact World Champion at Rebellion, and all wrestlers were banned from ringside for this ceremony. You could feel that Steve Macklin wanted to have his moment, and especially he wanted to rub it in the face of all the Canadian fans here in Toronto.
I mean, yeah, look, this is his crowning moment, his crowning achievement. I can't, look, say what you will about his tact and his way of going about things, but man, I cannot blame the guy for fighting and digging and scratching and clawing for so damn long, and now getting his moment and really soaking it in and making everybody else soak it in too.
Yeah, he also wanted to make sure the president of Impact Wrestling, Scott DAmour, really soaked it in. At Rebellion, it was Steve Macklin who was demanding Scott DAmour come down to the ring and hand him the championship. Scott begrudgingly did that, but was a man of his word, said that he would do that, and ultimately handed Steve Macklin the championship. Macklin was not thrilled with the way that all went down and attacked Scott DAmour from behind with the belt to the back of the head. I thought that was absolutely classless. So Scott DAmour once again having to deal with the antics of Steve Macklin this evening, but Scott DAmour wasn't going to let this continue. ultimately laying out the next challenge for Steve Macklin, his first challenger for his Impact World Championship.
Well, let's make sure, too. Steve Macklin kind of laid out the challenge himself. He said he would fight any Canadian. While we're here in beautiful Toronto, he has made it clear that he can beat up, he will take on any challenger from Canada. In fact, he thought, and maybe he was hoping, too, that Scott DAmour would answer that challenge, but it was Scott DAmour who made it clear he had something else in mind.
Yeah, ultimately, that something else was the thing that is not human.
I was saying, keyword thing,
Yeah,
not
thing.
person in this case.
PCO, Perfect Creation, won, the first man to step up. And this is very interesting because remember, it was the four-way match at the No Surrender event a few months ago. Steve Macklin won that match to become the #1 contender at the time to the Impact World Champion Josh Alexander for a title shot at Rebellion. It was speculated by many, myself included, that PCO was moments away from winning that matchup had it not been for Eddie Edwards.
That's right, and we saw what happened with them at Rebellion with that incredible last rites match as well. PCO finally putting Eddie Edwards behind him, but now he's looking ahead at Steve Macklin and potentially the Impact World Championship.
Yeah, that has been made official by Scott DAmour. So on Friday, May 26th in London, Ontario, Canada, live on Impact Plus, Fight TV, and YouTube for our Ultimate Insiders, the new Impact World Champion will make his first defense of his title. Steve Macklin defends against PCO. Home turf advantage for PCO, the French-Canadian Frankenstein, in Canada at Under Siege.
And I mean, look, Steve Macklin has had a hell of a year, a run to get to this championship. He's been through everything. We've seen him go through barbed wire massacre, name after name after name. But PCO is unlike anybody that Macklin has faced, especially with all these stakes on the line, all that pressure, everything going into this matchup. Steve Macklin, his first match, his first defense out of the gate, and he's got PCO. That's unreal. I hope you're ready, Steve. I know you're good at preparing, but this is a big one.
Yeah, Steve Macklin's got to get ready. Mission accomplished at Rebellion, but a brand new task is at hand in the form of PCO come Under Siege. Thank you for joining us here on the Impact Wrestling post-show, live from ringside here at the Rebel in Toronto. He's the Drama King, Matthew Rehwoldt. I'm Tom Hannifan. Join us next week for more Impact on Access TV.